Welcome, Marcelo.
Yeah.
I am, yeah, we're having an impromptu conversation around the regenerative lighthouse village vision that I shared a bit more of a heart transmission about during on a call with Marcelo and a few other folks for the Source Keepers Guild last week. And Marcelo asked me after the call if that he would really love to get to know more about the specifics of the vision and some of the different systems and the structures of the village and the practicalities. And I asked if he would be open to recording a conversation to basically interview me and have a dialogue together because I'm also curious about your take and perspective on all of this. So we are recording this and not sure if it's going to be something that is posted or not, but we'll record it as if it could be.
Yeah.
So thank you,
Well,
Marcelo.
yeah, of course. No, such a pleasure though. Yeah, I think just to start off, like I was very touched by the vision in general. I think it's something that, my heart longs for too. I feel like something that I'm trying to work towards too. So um at the same time that my heart longs for it and gets excited about it, I know it's like a long way. And it's not a given that those things just happen because of like good intention and folks that can imagine things in a deep way. Like it requires a lot of stuff to bring this to life. So so I was really curious about that because as I said, like in our call, like I see the beautiful storyteller and person that can imagine like beautiful roads and also like a strategist within you. So I wanted to tap into some of the strategy in there. And I think maybe like the first question I wanted to ask Tucker is, I remember during the guild call, you mentioned that even if you were given the money right now, that would be enough to, I don't know, buy land or like start this village in a more like material sense, and like building that on land, you wouldn't take it, right? Like, because you said that like you weren't ready for it. I think there are many reasons for that, but like that touched me in a lot of ways. And I kind of wanted to understand what's behind that because I have a sense that it's almost like the reason why you didn't accept the money is because there are a few things that need to be in place for money to come in, otherwise things can get lost. So I'm kind of wondering, yeah, if it's true, like what are the things that you feel like has to be in place for you to potentially accept money to start building this at some point?
Yeah, it's a great question. Maybe just because we are recording, I'll say what the thing is and then answer that question. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I've shared in different articles over the past few years little flashes of this vision, but essentially it came through during in April in April of 2020. So this was at the very start of COVID. I was on an island in Maine where I was born called Peaks Island, and I was there about to celebrate my 30th birthday. Just came off a big Vision Quest experience in which this whole soul download came through, and I really felt like I crossed a threshold into making a deep vow to this vision. And this vision was more mythopoetic and metaphorical at the time, but it had the feeling of a village, of a new and ancient village that has a lighthouse as its mythopoetic like it's symbolism. And of course I was on an island in Maine, hearing lighthouses all day long, and also I was born as a newborn baby listening to lighthouses on that island in Maine. And so I actually have a an image of a lighthouse right up there that I've had in my bedroom my whole life. So it's not surprising that this metaphor came through in that during that time. And yeah, the I call it a metamodern regenerative village, and I call it that in part to separate the metamodern represents a new cultural worldview, a sensibility, a way of being, even an artistry, I would say, that is different from a lot of the hippie villages and communes and intentional communities of the 60s. And the word regenerative represents more of the regenerative culture that's happening right now in finance and farming and basically in every sector right now there's this regenerative move, which is to say how can we create what is deeply aligned and nourishing for us as humans, but also have that be in right alignment with the greater planetary system, with nature. And village represents essentially the a feeling of that felt sense of tribe, of family, of a community that is um, not just kind of coming and going because there's a sense of deeper commitment to each other that is beyond the hyper individualism of, say, a city where it's kind of each person is just there, sort of living their individual dream more or less. I'm, of course, speaking in broad generalizations here. I know this isn't true of everything. It's just a broad brushstroke of modernism. But it's also different from traditionalism in the sense where people feel like their identity is baked into the need to conform to the collective and that they don't have any individual sovereignty, perhaps. And so this is a metamodern upshift of village, which is bringing that deep alignment and relationship and commitment to a larger whole, but also doing that in service of our individual flourishing, you could say, which of course is deeply interconnected with all of life. So this is a very simple overview of the village, and I might publish alongside this if I decide to publish this video, some written text that is more about the sense of where this is coming from on a heart level, like why I care so much about this, more about the soul dimension of it, and then this call we'll begin to dive into more of the practicalities for those who are interested in that. So was your question was
Yeah,
why? Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to touch on what you said, because to me, there's an aspect of what you said that already feels like strategy
Uh,
in some way to me, because at least in our guild call, you didn't necessarily unpack even like the wording that you're using. And it
yeah,
seems like each word has like a big significance to it, like the meta modern and like the cultural worldview that is behind this, the artistic, aesthetics, and then regenerative and then village. So I just want to point to that also because I might want to also like dig into each one
yeah,
of these words even more because I feel like I can feel this sense of like, uh, there's some, I don't know if, I don't even know if like robustness is like a word, but there's a sense of like being something robust, that is like well thought out, while is very like close to your heart. So I just want to reflect that back before you even answer the question that I had asked you
yeah.
prior.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so the lighthouse imagery is my unique mythopoetic lens. So it has more of the artistry. And of course, not everyone needs to, even if the actual concrete village does end up on an island with a lighthouse, not everyone needs to refer to it as a lighthouse. They can find their own unique mythopoetic lensing towards it. But that's my heart song, you could say. And then metamodernism is more about the evolutionary aspect. It's about what is something new and fresh and emerging now. It's more about it almost feels like creating into the future and creating from the future as well. And then regenerative has a feeling of more of a sense of alignment. So it's like an alignment with right relationship with life itself. And that's more timeless, you could say. It's not, doesn't, the context is less important and it's more about living in alignment with the whole. And then village is more of the ancient kind of qual. It's the ancient future quality. It's the sense of the deep humanity, the underlying shared desire that I sense we all have, which I refer to it as the deep sense of wanting to feel at home, deeply, wildly, preciously at home with ourselves, with each other, with the land, with our sense of meaning and purpose in life, with our sense of connection to the greater mystery. And so that village quality of being around the hearth, humans sitting around the fire, it has this sense that, as Ram Dass says, one day we'll come to remember that all we're doing for eternity is sitting around the fire.
Mhm. Oh, beautiful. I love Ramdasu, so this touches me on a deeper level.
Mhm.
Um, I'm sensing like to go back to that first question maybe later because there's like
Sure.
other things just coming up here for me right now because um, I think one another thing that we were talking about in the guild call was I think I brought that idea of just like contrast community of like how does like the lighthouse metamodern regenerative village contrast to other communities that already exist out there today, and just the sense of here, like the name of it seems to me that maybe like the regenerative and the village aspect might be embedded in some other like communities. The metamodern, I'm not sure necessarily, but all of these coming together, it seems like there's something very unique. So I wonder if there's anything that you might want to share in relationship to how do you see that, like this metamodern village contrasts with eco villages or like monasteries or like retreat centers. And I don't know if that's a fair question, but I was just wondering if anything comes to mind for you of like the uniqueness of what you see that exists there that it seems like you haven't been finding anywhere else.
Yeah, so the backstory to that is starting in 2017, I want to say it might have been early 2018. I started traveling all over the world and spending time visiting different eco villages, different intentional communities, monasteries, festivals, and really immersed myself in what's out there. And my intention at that time was I was living in LA and then I moved to Maine during COVID. And my intention was to find a place where I could live and to serve. I didn't want to have to build something new, even though that vision came through as my first impulse was to find that vision already actualized somewhere on the planet and then to serve that. And I created this list of, I don't know, over 100 communities and sort of went viral. It's still making the rounds on the internet. And my point in mentioning that is that I really did search, and I don't think that the place that lives in my heart exists yet. Now, there's a few projects like the Future Thinkers Smart Village in Canada. There's Traditional Dream Factory in Portugal. There's Nuanu in Bali, which I actually helped to start at one point, or I was on the creation team of that project. And these are juicy, alive projects where I'm like, okay, the thing is happening, it's happening, but it's coming through the uniqueness of the source keepers who are tending to those fields. And they're really close, but they're not quite exactly the thing that I'm orienting towards, which maybe has a bit more of for lack of a better word, I don't really love this, but more of a spiritual sensibility, or maybe like a soul-based relationship, a soul-infused culture. Traditional Dream Factory which is in Portugal. It's still under construction in many ways, but it's such a brilliant project, and they're focused more on kind of Burning Man style culture with regenerative agriculture, and they're doing it brilliantly. I would highly recommend people check it out. And then Future Thinker, Future Thinker Smart Village, I actually was going to be an investor at one point in that project and move there. And then I felt this was around maybe 2019 or something. And I felt at that time that, no, it might have been a little later, like 2021, but I felt at that time that there was more in my own personal um, transformational death and rebirth journey that I needed to be focused on before I could land in a community. So the question was around contrast, and I just want to almost say the opposite thing first, which is I hope that whatever community that lives in my heart is not special in the future. I hope that it's I hope that people are like, yeah, this is just how, humans live. And at the same time, I have no desire to force people into living this way. Like that is not that doesn't get me going. The lighthouse imagery is around beaming out an invitation and saying like, "Hey, come join us if it feels like a resonant fit for both parties." And it's much more about doing something kind of small and intimate that grows at with right timing and at right speed, and then is about reimagining civilization on some grand scale. That might be somebody else's soul work, but it's not really mine. I'd rather Yeah, I'd rather tend to one garden and have that garden be really flourishing and then invite others to come and see what we've been up to and to share research and learnings with others, to allow and maybe even go for a short period of time and help to, get that project up and running, but not in an effort to scale fast. So both of those exist simultaneously.
Yeah.
One of the things, Marcelo, but this answers your first question, is that in through my research, I found that it's something like 95% of intentional community projects, quote unquote, fail within the first year. Now, by fail, what I mean is they cease to exist after 1 year. It's something, or it might be like 70% after 1 year and then 95% after 5 years. And so the point is that a lot of people are feeling collectively this vision. This is not a unique vision. There's a collective consciousness thirst to re-village that is in many parts of the globe right now. And so these projects are being prototyped all over the world, which is awesome. And a lot of the times, just it's almost like a cauldron or a developmental catalyst where people go and they try and create this thing, and then it, it might not work after a year, mostly because of ego tensions, relational breakdown, and financial challenges of sustainability. Those are the two biggest reasons why these projects stop. And so when I heard this, when I was doing a bunch of research, and talking to people that have started these different communities, I really felt like, okay, I don't I don't want to do that. I would rather I'd rather really excuse me, start small with a gathering for a few days or with starting a community in Boulder that meets that isn't land-based, but we're all in the same town and we meet regularly. And then what are the relationship challenges that come up when that happens? What are the rituals that we can design as a collective that might be gesturing towards this new metamodern sensibility? What are the ways that we can bring together people who are feeling deeply cohered with this particular soul collective vision in this metamodern sensibility, and just live together for a week and really breathe into that possibility, but without needing to spend a ton of time and energy and resources and broken relationships to prototype something that I think if we truly feel and feel into our systems, we can know that we're actually not quite ready to do that yet. And when I say we, I think I'm referring to the center of gravity of the collective being in which I consider myself a cohort member of.
Yeah, no, beautiful. Um, hmm. Yeah, it's wonderful to hear that because in a lot of ways, I think that's what moves me to be closer to you and a bunch of other folks that are part of, this community and like even the guild and a lot of folks in the metamodern space. Um, because there is a sense of like there's a sense of like coherence and alignment that is being built over years,
Yeah.
if not decades already. And some people, and I think you're one of them, like very intentionally trying to, learn how to build larger communities with smaller experiments
Yeah.
that already have aspects of what this larger community could look like. So it's almost you're prototyping in the small what the larger whole can actually look like. And yeah, I think I'm just wondering if there's anything you want to share about that, because like to me that is almost like a part of like the like if I remember, I think in a response to Patricia, you were sharing that you could even see yourself if like this really gets off the ground in the future, becoming some sort of like I don't know if a consultant is the right word, but like
Right.
someone that could guide others in like how to build like such communities, like
Yeah.
let's say be successful. And to me, there's something very particular about this moment that we are living and how these relationships are being held and these small experiences have been constructed that feels so crucial for the sustainable future of that. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah. Can you say the last sentence one more time?
I said that it seems like there's something so crucial and unique to be understood in a deep way about how, these small experiments have been built in the past couple of years that
Yeah.
seems essential for the success of the larger
Yeah, so I
vision.
see each of these smaller projects, including the guild itself, which is quite a substantial project. By the way, we're referring to the Source Keepers Guild, which you can learn more about on the Substack, Source Keepers Guild Substack, or on my Substack when I link to it. Yeah, so I metaphorically feel them. I feel them as bricks, each are a brick in the larger cathedral of this village vision. So they're not separate projects that are over here. They're actually tending to the soil, tending to the field of the village vision. And that village vision is being tended to globally, collectively, and through a network of souls who are deepening into coherence and connection. And the Source Keepers Guild in particular is asking for people to vow into relationship, which means that essentially there's consequences for not showing up to the collective. Now, of course, there's also um, it's not what do I want to say? So much of the projects that I've been doing are really heavily curated. And I think that's quite different from almost all other intentional communities, which is more or less have an open door and people can go. And what happens is a lot of folks go that are beautiful humans and like we all have, or maybe there's a hungry ghost in them that is looking, that is searching, that is seeking for some connection or for a place of healing or for a place of stability. And often it attracts in energy that is quite traumatized on just a very basic psychological level. Now, they're also really beautiful humans that you very quickly fall in love with, and then it becomes very challenging because you're like, whoa, this person has all this relational stuff coming up for them, or even spiritual, experiences that are maybe ungrounded coming up for them. And in a way, they're having all these big openings, but also in a way, it's really creating a lot of intensity in the field. But we also kind of love them, but then we need to set boundaries, but we don't really have clear agreements because we all just kind of wing this project and it's all happening on the fly, and things get messy. I think this is like the postmodern mess, that often comes in a lot of these projects. And what I'm trying to do differently, imperfectly, of course, but is to say, oh, what if we brought together 8 people for a weekend gathering, and then maybe one person is struggling, and like, how can we prototype boundaries and relationships in that context? And then what if we brought together 45 people for a week, and work? That's a ton of diversity, even when there's 45 people who are so fully developmentally and values and principles aligned. There's still so much diversity and so many ways for things to kind of go into chaotic streams. And so it's like, can we evolve wisely, essentially? And when the time is right to move into village, I don't see it as an open invite for whoever's excited to come and join. I see there being a very thoughtful curation process that the collective source keepers who are the stewards of that project, which I imagine is going to be 3 or 4 of us, myself being one of those, that will have one of the first things we'll do is design basically circles of intimacy that are to the center of the hearth. So the hearth, the fire, is that eternal mystery that we are pouring our love into. And almost every gathering that I've done thus far has had a fire or a representation of a fire at the center where we are pouring our collective attention. It's like the egregore of awakened wholeness or of sacred world. And we pour our grief into it, we pour our love into it, we pour our devotion into it. And that's the toroidal field that then feeds us also simultaneously. So when we're doing that, we're really doing that in service of what we're in devotion to, but immediately alongside that comes a desire to protect that, to really protect the field, protect the energy, to be a sacred warrior for that beauty. And so that's more the metamodern sensibility is to both be open and inclusive, but then also to be wise and discerning. And I'm working all of that out in real time through all of these smaller projects.
Yeah, wonderful. Um, yeah, I think this might be like a maybe like a hard question even like to formulate right now, but I think especially because you have been, like consistently bringing very intentionally these people together. And what it seems to me also is that, I imagine that the folks that are going to be leading this with you at the beginning probably come out of these experiments and these gatherings that you have been cultivating. Um, is there anything you might want to share about like almost like what is your sensibility to bringing these folks together, to like choosing the folks to be in the spaces that you're in right now, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
My it's I imagine people might find this answer annoying, but it's mostly intuition driven, you know. There's been maybe 4 or 5 times where I've ignored my intuition and you know maybe one of the other people attending are like, oh, I really want this person to come, and I usually know right away, but just by hearing their name, I'm like, or yes, and then almost always I would have a Zoom call or a telephone call, and then I really tend to know. And there's like a few times, it's rare, but there's a few times where I really don't know. I'm like, it's kind of a coin toss, and I wait for some other sign or synchronicity to reveal what wants to happen, you could say. Um, yeah, and so it's I have like curation principles that I've written for different projects. There's different developmental thresholds that we've written for the Source Keepers Guild, but it's mostly just the sense of my body feels like it's opening toward it's like a flower. Is the flower opening or is the flower closing? You know, it's very erotic in a
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like I hear that as like there is a certain kind of like clarification process for you that for some people is yeah like the flower is blossoming and it's opening, it's like a big like full body as, and then for others that is not the case. It's not that it's like a no, but is, oh, let me investigate into that and like sense with the person like what's here, ask for perspectives from other folks to really understand
Yeah.
sense to be for it. Yeah.
And so at the scale of a village, which say has, you know, 40 to 150 to maybe 300 people, depending on, you know, the context, I you know, it can't be one person or a small group just curating each person there. And so there's a left brain and a right brain process to it, where I'd say there's maybe a committee that is committee is such a lame word. So part of the creation process right now is actually coming up with better words for things that have such a modern tone to them. So what's a better word for committee, but like a circle of wisdom council folks, you know, that bring that where a new person comes in and essentially there's a dating process. And you know, it's not that complicated. It's like there's a certain amount of time where they can stay, you know, and then they're maybe paying to be a visitor. And then if they want to continue forward and that feels right for the community, then it enters more into an apprenticeship phase. And then that apprenticeship phase works out, then it enters. And so there's a way in which, because you don't really know someone's patterns until you essentially see them in a contracted state. And that often takes time to reveal itself. And of course, it's not like oh, people aren't allowed here if they have shit that they're working through. There would be a village of zero people, you know, but there's a certain way in which does it feel like the whole can support this human in a
Mm-hmm.
way that is not going to detract from the mission of the whole in a way that is counterproductive for the whole, which includes the individual that is a part of that whole. You know what I mean? So to
Yeah.
me, this is where this idea of like another metamodern term is the omni-win, you know, the
Mhm.
win-win-win kind of vibe. Now, in the real world, that might not always be possible in every scenario. And certainly in some of my gathering projects, there's been times when we've asked someone to leave or it wasn't a right fit. And it led to relational breakdown for a while with some of those individuals. And I imagine that will happen in the future as well. And the more that there can be sort of a field coherence that we culturally train and educate and condition folks to be in alignment with, the more that sort of win-win, omni-win answer, if you will reveal itself naturally as a felt embodied experience. And it won't have to be as structured through the mind or through legal protocols and stuff like this. And that can still be there as backup, but that's not maybe the main way of relating to decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
And that's a bit more of a because there's a green version of that, which is like let's all take a consensus and be in a circle and raise our hands and like and if we're not in consensus, then we keep arguing about it for hours until we finally come to consensus. That's not what I'm talking about. I just want to be very clear about that. And I'm also not really talking about more that teal integral thing where it's like, if as long as we create the most incredible map and it has all the details and it has the integration of every single system that's ever worked, then we can have the meta map and then that will figure it out. I'm not talking about that either. This is maybe more a bit more of like a turquoise type expression, which again, I say that with humility that I don't, we're all learning what that is together. I don't know if it but I get a sense of that quite often in a lot of our projects where it's coming from a deeper place. There's a deeper coherence or alignment that the personality might not be happy about that, but it's almost like the soul knows and the soul of the collective knows, and there's a dropping into a deeper verticality of truth that has its own intelligence that we can trust, even when it might not make as much sense conceptually, but then it's also not bypassing into that. Like a lot of what I see is when people get in contact with that, they'll say something like, I don't know, man, it's just not my truth, you know? And that can be pointing to something really important, and that might be true for that person. But also, how do we then show up and take responsibility for that and take responsibility for the impacts that that decision had and, be in relationship around it, not kind of bypass away into that. So these are all the cultural muscles that are being flexed and prototyped and experimented with, in a way, moment by moment, and that we're all doing in the network right now. And then we're all sharing our learnings back into the hearth, and that hearth is feeding the fire of our shared vision.
Yeah. Yeah. No, wonderful. I want to like ask something in relationship to that because like as you're saying, and I feel the same, like even in my own experience of how this sensibility has been developed in more spaces that I'm in and witnessing others doing it and then practicing and attuning myself to be able to come closer to that higher truth, and making decision from that place. So like what I hear you saying is like this is almost like for like a better word, just like a capacity that we're developing that helps create that type of village that you're imagining, right? And that takes time, for folks to really understand
Yeah.
what that is in embodied felt sense. But that feels crucial, like it's a crucial capacity and ability to have to be able to not only participate, but to contribute to the evolution of the village. Is there like other things that you might be sensing that we're kind of like collectively practicing and refining and attuning more and more that is also becoming almost like a certain kind of like capacity that you're seeing that feels crucial for that robust structure of the village to really come to life?
Yeah, I would say well, source keeping is one of them. So source keeping is a sort of made up word that I credit to Cheryl, but Cheryl credits it. There's a we don't know where it came from. Ria Bach maybe. And essentially what I experience source keeping as is deep alignment. So that vertical alignment that we're talking about with what is ours to do in the world. And that can look like a future vision, for example, of a regenerative lighthouse village, but it can also look like the best next step moment to moment. And it's a quality of entering a flow state that is not just a state, but it's a stage, or it's a view, it's a home base. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a home base. And yeah, that alignment is sometimes we call it in deep connection to our soul vow, but you can use whatever terminology you want. It's coming from, the truth of our uniqueness or the deep medicine that we're here to serve. And my sense is that what I see in a lot of these regenerative or just eco villages or whatever, sorry, excuse my throat. It's a little dry this morning. What I see is that many people, including myself, at the time when I was traveling to a lot of these places, are going to find a healing culture. They're going to have healing experiences, awakening experiences, transformational experiences. And that's very likely what their, deep felt sense of what their soul is needing right now. But what happens is that people come to, say, a community like Pachamama, where I spent a lot of time. I love Pachamama. I wrote a beautiful essay about it that I'm very proud of. And people come and they have these big openings, these big experiences, and then they leave, because they kind of got what they came for, and then they're off to do whatever they do next. Um, and one of the challenges with that is that it's more like a chapter of life thing, I would say. I do see it developmentally, but I also see it as phases of life where there's folks who there's a way in which I'm beginning to enter into a phase of life where I don't really want to travel anymore. I don't really want to go see the cool new place or the thing that is sexy and shiny. I really want to ground and deepen in and start a family and really build long term and really root. Um, and I want to do that from a place of feeling like there's like a wholeness, there's a fullness to a wholeness that is ever present, and there's not a deep need to sort of seek or attach to something like a community in order to feel that wholeness. It's a wholeness that's innate. And at the same time, that wholeness has its own desire and its own way of wanting to serve and its own way of wanting to share that wholeness. And I want to find others who are excited to, especially at a leadership level capacity, where they're really setting the field or holding the field with a particular responsibility, who are orienting from that ground of innate wholeness um, and are able to sense into what their deep source keeping alignment is. And the truth of the clarity of that arises as having a core piece of the mandala, this village vision, and then they serve from that place. And then when our parts come up and our traumas come up and our triggers come up, that's fantastic. We can work with that and have, ways to be in relationship with that. But there's an orientation shift. I call it sometimes a post-healing orientation, which is a dumb phrase, I'll admit, but it's this idea that there's certain chapters in life that we go through where our primary orientation to reality is for healing or awakening or something. And then that kind of runs its course, hopefully, and shifts more into a different orientation. And this community village vision I have is for folks who are leading from that different orientation. It's a bit more grounded, a bit more rooted, a bit more in touch with their with innate wholeness and also their uniqueness, their soul uniqueness, you could say, and are serving from that integrated place. And then creating structures like retreats and offerings where different people can come in that are having more of those healing, foregrounded desires, and we can support that.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a little
Mhm.
long-winded, but does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. It makes total sense. I think I just I guess like the question that I had asked is like, oh, what kind of like capacities are you kind of like seeing that the network is developing? And like you start with source keeping, right? Like
Yeah.
so I see like everything that you said as like a as like a way of being that has like source keeping at the core and the understanding of what source keeping is. Are there do you see, are you seeing like other things also like on top of that? Like I just want to open the space
Yeah,
if there's
so
like
I'd say, well, I'm working on with Pacific Integral right now, and they have a model of seven facets of awakened wholeness. And so those are um, embodiment, complexity, capacity, intimacy and relationship, um, awakening, soul expression, collective. There might be one more. And the idea is that each of these are territories, are domains of life that have endless capacity for growth and development and embodiment, and filling out and growing down and all of that. And I think a simpler way to answer it is just as a network, what I see is that we are grounding into an embodied felt sense of wholeness being ever present and here and now, and something that is already complete, even as the evolutionary impulse arises within us to serve and to create something new, you could say. And so there's this integration of our evolutionary soul self that we're deepening into through, say, source keeping, with a embodiment of like a grounded wholeness, a quality of being deeply at home in the here and now, regardless of what's happening, regardless of what context or situation is arising in experience. And the integration of those two as one non-dual whole um, has a particular there's like a vibration or there's a particular resonance to that integration that I feel is very juicy and nourishing to be around, and that felt sense quality of those two things integrating into one whole, which you could say is always maybe already happening on an absolute level, but like on a relative level, I see it as a developmental process. And there's just a particular beauty of coherence that's possible when folks are coming together that are orienting from that place. And then collectively, we can also orient from that place. So it doesn't stop at the individual level. It's more like a holon or holographic in a sense that it's happening at all levels simultaneously. But when we can do it at one level, it also resonates and ripples out to the other levels and vice versa.
yeah. Yes. Thank you, Zachar. Try to sense into like there are a few things I want to ask. Hmm. Yeah, there was something coming up for me even as you're bringing like Pacific Integral, and I know that you're like training and supporting like Planetary Dharma with John Churchill. I'm kind of curious also like with all the research and travel that you have done with like other communities also. Um, like how are you imagining I know how to put this, like a certain kind of like ontology or worldview that is kind of like holding the community itself. Because I know that for a lot of communities, like it's that like there's like a clear teacher that holds a certain kind of tradition that attracts a certain kind of people to that community. And in my experience with some eco villages, that's not the case, that there's not a teacher and there's something else that is there, or sometimes there's not even like a clear understanding of what the worldview or ontology is that people are organizing around. So I'm just wondering if you're wrestling with that and how you're wrestling with that, like how you're imagining that for like the village.
Mhm. Yeah. In general, I feel the impulse of the Buddha is the Sangha type of vibe. And I really love source keeping as a leadership model, or working with source from Tom Nixon as a leadership model, which is this idea that there's certain beings who are holding a vision that lives in their body as a resonant field of frequency that knows how to deeply attune with that vision and that is trustworthy. What I desire is for the collective that creates the village to be in coherence around and to have the capacities to sense into the deep resonant aliveness of each being and what they are holding as part of the larger whole. And part of what Cheryl and I are, so Cheryl Shu and I are doing with the Source Keepers Guild is we are sourcing from the middle. So not one of us is the leader of the Source Keepers Guild. We are both equally holding that. And I almost don't want to jinx it, but I've been insanely surprised at how equal it does feel. Like it feels like we're both contributing 50-50 in almost all the ways, but not from a place of like we need to both show up 50-50. It just feels like life is pulsing through us and we're both adding a more or less equal amount of source energy into this collective project. So my sense is that life is experimenting with me and with her to kind of prove this possibility of more of a collective source keeping potential, and that the village vision, which by the way, Cheryl has said that she wants to stay in Toronto and she's born and raised there and has that's her village is Toronto, and so I don't see her working on this village project, at least not explicitly on the leadership team. But what I see is people coming into my life in the next couple of years, and I already have one person, Ari Nazem, who is a brilliant young man, and he really holds this village vision tattooed on his soul. And when we're together, there's full coherence. It's like we're not, it's just, there's just alignment. Alignment is just there between us. No, there's still stuff that arises like the personality level and things and, developmental capacities that we're both kind of working through and growing together in. But the soul resonance of the of the vision is cohered already. And what I am looking to do is to, yeah, I'm not really looking, but I'm trusting that those people come in at the right moments. And when the team is aligned and we'll know that we're coherent and aligned. And I mean that in a very practical sense of like, oh, there's 4 or 5 of us now that are all in, that are ready to do this. And like things will start happening and the synchronicities will start unfolding for whatever wants to come from that group of people. I imagine that's at least 3 or 4 years out, 3 years out. And so, yeah, but the process is already unfolding. I'm pausing because I'm getting off track from your question and I liked your question. Can you remind me what your question was?
Yeah, I think it was I don't think you're off track. I was asking more about like, I don't even know if the question is like, what's holding the space, the village beyond the individual in some sense, and I can see
Oh,
sometimes like we feel
yeah.
apology, like, or a
Well,
teacher custodian tradition,
yeah,
and I pointed to some,
John
yeah.
Churchill and is working on something that he calls the sacred secular operating system, which is not the wording I would choose necessarily, but it's essentially a cultural code, you could say. It's a general blueprint that different metamodern communities all over the world can have they can basically agree to take that on as their baseline operating system. And then from that, each project diversifies it to make it their own unique expression of that. So it's a little bit like creating John sometimes uses the word egregore, which is like this collective energy body that we are feeding into and being fed by. And imagine it like the sun. Like the sun shines very differently in Nepal than it does in Cuba, than it does in Boulder, Colorado, than it does in Brazil, where you are. But it's the same sun. And so the sacred sector operating system could almost be like that, where it's this collective energy field that is shining rays in different places that are have the universal quality of the sun, the radiant sun, but are illuminating differently in each place depending on the context of that geography and culture and all that. And I just want to read something. This is going to be a little bit risky because I was just looking through some notes this morning before this call, and the only thing that I came across that I thought was kind of interesting was something I wrote in June of 2022. So this is quite early on when this was about a year after the vision first came through. And I read this thing and they're called lighthouse principles of it. I would call it more like a secular but still mystical um, non-dual orientation towards, I don't know. I'll just read it. I think you'll get it. So, lighthouse principles. One, life is a miracle worth celebrating. Two, God is all and all is God. Three, we are God expressing as boundless diversity. Four, God is right here, right now. This is it. Five, life is an eternally unfolding journey home. Six, the journey home is the home that we are journeying to. Seven, each of our journeys will be entirely unique and completely universal simultaneously. Eight, relationship helps us see God in many and many as God. Nine, perfection is a recognition that all is love, including imperfection. 10, our life has an impact. Everything is interconnected. 11, service is love in action, the highest form of celebrating the miracle of life. So
I
I don't know. That's probably not going to ever see the light of day. But there's just something in there where I was like, if you really break down all the traditions, if you really get to the essence of all mystical teachings, it's more or less gesturing towards something like that, which is like life is a miracle, it's a mystery. We don't really know how any of this is possible, but also we're just fully living in it as God in wonderment of its own creation that is coming to discover itself moment by moment, but is also already fully at home and in the recognition that discovering itself is the very self that is being discovered, and being created in that discovery process, and that is a love story. That is an um, amazing and also at times like a deeply painful process that is life unfolding, and that we get to fall in love with that, and including with our grief, including with the struggles, including with the suffering and the challenges, and to see that as also part of the miracle because that opens our heart and that brings in a sense of awe, and that awe brings in a sense of compassion, and that compassion brings in a sense of wanting to serve and wanting to help others, and then that's basically God loving itself um, indefinitely. And there's something about that is hilarious and profound and very simple and ordinary and incredibly um, beyond words. And I imagine that the temple that is at the center of the heart of the village will resonate with something along the lines of that message.
yeah. Oof. Mm. Yeah, there was something when you're sharing about the what's the name? Sacred Secular Operating System. Uh, there was like some sort of like rightness that I felt through my body, and like I didn't. I think maybe I've heard of it, but I don't know. It felt like the first time that I was hearing that, uh, and it seems like you know the principles that you wrote. it seems like are gesturing towards something in this direction, this sacred secular like operating system in some sense, you know. Um, yeah, so I'm just staying with that. Is there has Churchill had written about it? Like, is this like published or?
Not publicly. He's spoken a little here and there in random places, but no. But I'm working with him behind the scenes on it, and so you'll be the first to know. And there's a way in which so I'm working with John and Cheryl right now as two of my because John is another person who has this village vision tattooed on him. So there's John and there's Ari. Those are the only two people I know who, when I speak with them, there's just utter and complete alignment on the village vision. Um, Cheryl is, yeah, this yin, I want to say like I was gonna say wizard, but that's not very yin like. But she is very integrated, so maybe yin wizard is a good way to put it. But I feel the quality of being of her transmission is the very thing that most brings me joy and aliveness. Like her particular flavor of metamodern sensibility is that which I'm in deep devotion to. And she helps bring that out in me, and I help create space for her to bring that out. And we co-create also our own version of it together as a field that we then invite others into through gatherings or through the Source Keepers Guild. And then John is more like Cheryl once, I think, called him the warrior of yin wisdom. So it's almost the opposite, you know? So Cheryl's the yin wizard, and then John is the warrior of yin wisdom. And it's really interesting because it's almost like left brain, right brain as well. John's, and him and I are more around the structure and the coherence and the alignment and the right protocols and the right systems and all of that. And Cheryl and I are much more in like the field coherence and the felt sense of resonance and a deep sacred bow that is beyond any words. And when so right now, my life is weaving with a lot of the two of them, and it's integrating essentially like in me, but not just in me, Tucker, but in me, meaning the field itself and us and the wholeness that is this awareness that is shimmering towards what feels like a regenerative lighthouse village vision.
I think hearing even like you bringing John Churchill more right now, and I know that you said that like Cheryl, might want to stay in Toronto and all of that, but I just what is it? Yeah, there's a level of like complementarity that exists uh, that feels yeah very crucial also for any sort of project with this like vision to come to life in some sense. And it seems to me that this like everyone is kind of like finding each other and attracting each other, and where there's like this you say like tattooed in the heart
Yeah.
commitment to the village. There's even something about that, like the tattooed in the heart, that it's almost like a some sort of like measurement for understanding who's there, maybe as like a leadership team,
Yeah.
because I can feel it in you. The little I know about Churchill and Adi, like I can see that too, like it's like a vow and a devotion of their lives to that
Mhm.
vision, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just obvious when it's there. And maybe it takes a little bit of time to see that in someone, maybe just hang out and get coffee with someone and you talk about whatever, and you don't really know that they hold that tattoo until 2 months later or something like that. So it's not like it's obvious from the first moment, but when it's obvious, it's obvious. And um, there's a way in which my life feels very simple because the more my energetic, resonant, attunement, felt sense, intuitive, non-conceptual, knowing, trust field opens up, the more simple everything becomes because you just sort of act as a flow of feeling that is knowing what to do and where to go. No, I'm still a human that s- trips on my own shoelaces and makes mistakes and fucks up, but that doesn't feel like a experientially, that doesn't feel like a distraction. It feels like exactly the thing that needs to happen in order for the karma to liberate, to create more space for more of um, the truth of what wants to unfold.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
I'm noticing, Marcelo, that oh, are we over time? No, we have like 20 more minutes.
I'm gonna check in with you to see like how you're
Are
feeling
you
with
okay
time.
to go for a little bit longer?
Yeah. Sure.
I'm curious if I've still been I'm curious if you have curiosity or questions that might be even more specific, because I'm
Uh,
noticing that there's still a level of big picture or
yeah.
a lot of like the felt sense of things. And I am open to talking more about the village itself and the structures and what that might look like specifically. But no pressure to go there.
Well, I think I'm actually maybe. Well, is there something about like the structure, even like when you say right now that you feel like you want to share? Yeah, is there something that you feel like it's unique that you're seeing or trying to move towards in terms of structure or governance or whatever it is that you feel like you want to share about it? Because I don't know if I can ask the right question
Sure, sure. No, there's no
begin
right
with.
questions. I trust your curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing, this is very simple in a sense. I don't think I'm reinventing or I don't think I'm inventing something new. But I see there being concentric circles. And so at the center is maybe that leadership team, and maybe there's a vow that the leadership team goes to where they say, like with Cheryl and me, we just have a knowing. Now, it's a knowing that is humble. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but it's a knowing that we're likely in a 2 year intensive partnership that started this past October. And then that will create a partnership, and then that will transition over the course of a year. And then likely at that point, that's why I'm saying like I sense this is still about about 3 years out. It's because I feel like when this guild process evolves to a place where Cheryl and I step down from the source keeping of that, and maybe others step up, or maybe the guild dissolves and something else emerges. We don't know. But at that point, I imagine I'll be transitioning into other creative partnerships with other people. So that's sort of at the center, and there's a level of the closer you are to the hearth, which is you could say the source of the vision, or the it's not just a vision at some point, then it becomes an actual thing that you need to be responsible for. But the closer you are to that, the more responsibility there is and the more depth of commitment there is in order to be intimate with that. And then there's an outer rung, which are people that are maybe are committed to, say, living on the land. A lot of this is hypothetical without the details of the who, what, when, where, and why. But the second rung is people that are there full time. They're living on the land. Maybe they're financially invested. They're pouring their sense of soul service into stewarding a particular part of the project. And then there's another rung that are more like seasonal residents, where eventually maybe there's different lighthouse communities or lighthouse affiliate communities throughout the globe. And those that are more nomadic or wanting to be seasonally nomadic can travel to different places. And there's a shared culture, sacred secular operating system, or sensibility, but each place has its own different vibration and tone, and yeah. And then the next rung are people that are maybe coming for retreats and gatherings or apprenticeships that are more seasonal or shorter term. And then there's a rung of, locals who live nearby that come for different gatherings and events, and maybe farmers and stuff nearby that are supporting with food or different things. And then there's an outer rung, which is more the network, the global network that is aware of the project, that is maybe coming for short visits, that are coming to some of the online events, that are maybe helping to donate or just sending supportive energy to the project. So I see there being different thresholds. These are different thresholds, and in each threshold, there's practical and also spiritual, you could say, or like soulful commitments that are needed to be made in order to cross into those different thresholds. Now, yeah, and so it's there's almost a developmental process in a sense. What do I mean by that is that um, it's asking of people to show up with a certain level of capacity and with a certain agreement set in order to sort of move through the structures of the community. And at the same time, it's recognizing that each of those circles are, in a sense, almost equally important from one another. That might not be true on a practical sense, but on a big picture mandala sense, they all are feeding one another. They all are one whole that is making the village possible.
Yeah. I think in like connected to that, almost like I'm seeing kind of like the layers of engagement also with the community. Um, um, I was wondering if there's anything new that is already thinking about like the kind of like long-term sustainability of it without having like you or whoever was like the first people that are kind of like in the center, almost like not only that for the community itself, but also for and I would just use like scale here for lack of a better word for like how this can spread out is almost like also like do you see that also as like a training center for like folks that want to create like metamodern regenerative villages also? And is it
Yes,
yeah.
but my focus would be more on doing the one small thing, which is not a small thing, well, than it would be on, posting all these Instagram videos about how we're this, cool training center, and then people come and they're like, this place is a shit show, you know? And so now that might be good training of what not to do, but I think that we want to be cautious of how we not putting the cart before the horse. So yeah, that's why I mentioned the 3 year
Yeah.
commitment that Cheryl and I are in, because I have a sense that when this team forms to collectively source this project, that there'll be a felt sense of the timing that might be different for each person. And there'll be a natural moving in and out that is not, it's not like we wake up one day and we get an email. It's like, hey, I just decided to go to Bali instead next summer. So I'm out. It's not like that, hopefully. There's consequences for that. Um, yeah, I think of this sort of hyper individualistic postmodern. I'm just going to do whatever I want when I want because I'm not really responsible for anything else. And if that has any impact on anyone, that's just their shadow and they need to work on that. It's not my problem. That whole mindset is not going to fly in this community. I'll just say that. Um, and of course, that will show up. Like that's it's still gonna be there, but there'll be a cultural way of relating to that that will be different from the modern postmodern paradigm. But it's a tricky thing because I also don't want to create the illusion that, anyone can be a leader of the community if they just want that role and then they just need to wait until someone steps down and then they step in. And like it's a big responsibility. And I think that there needs to be I'm going to use democratic because I actually don't know what the future version of it would be. But I don't imagine it would be democratic in the sense of how America does democratic. But there might be some process of a larger whole coming into relationship with who wants to step into leadership. And then there's a ritual and there's a process that plays out over time that is intentional and thoughtful and designed, but also probably emergent. And I don't know what the details of that are yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Uh,
I'm curious whether I've been talking a lot and I'm just curious, yeah, like what's coming up for you and what you're resonating with, what you have. I also really would value if there's doubts, if there's like this fucking dude is just another privileged white guy talking about a utopian village that is probably never going to exist because he's living in his fantasy land and like this is bullshit. Like any that's also welcomed.
Um, I appreciate that check-in. Yeah, that's not my sense of it. Like, and I think because, like I've been getting to know you more and more and just like seeing how you're like entering spaces and like creating spaces and navigating life. I feel like I think there's a lot of rightness in a lot of things that you're trying to do. And I think there are a lot of things that you're like prototyping and testing that I feel like it's with a lot of integrity, you know? Um, and also they are surrounded by a lot of people that you trust and that trust you and that are kind of like hold you accountable and open your eyes, for things. So so anyways, like I have like it excites me to like hear what you're sharing. Um I don't think this is a doubt though, but it's just like it's more like a question in relationship to the engagement with the larger world, you know, because I can see this becoming such a unique and beautiful place for those who are there. And at the same time, I wonder, like, even like how is it the relationship and engagement with even like the communities around whatever this place is,
Yeah.
you know, and especially having like a very distant even like way of being or way of seeing reality, like how is that bridge, how is the engage, like
Yeah.
is part of the goal of this also to be almost like like the bodhisattva vow of like no, we're going in the world trying to really alleviate suffering of like the
Yeah. Yeah.
of all sentient beings. And if so, it seems like um yeah, it seems like there's even more that needs to be understood to understand how this relationship with real world really happens. I don't know
Yeah,
that
totally
the
makes sense. So there's a couple of things that are coming up. One is, there's something funny that happens at Pachamama specifically, and I know this is true of other communities, and it's also not true of some others as well, so I'm not making a generalization. Pachamama's in Costa Rica, and they've been around for 25 years now. Beautiful success story of a thriving community. Um, I've lived there for 6 months. Well, actually, 6.5 months, and three different visits. And something that people often say when they're there, usually white folks, Europeans, Americans, Canadians are like, oh, we got to get like the Ticos, which are what they call Costa Ricans, we got to get the Ticos to like come and like they have to experience this. Like there's so much here. And, they go out and they knock on the doors or like, and then they're like, don't you want to come hang out and eat our delicious organic food and do yoga with us? And the Tico's like, no, like, fuck off. Like, we're good. Like, we like, you guys do your thing and like, no problems. Like, we're happy it exists. There's not, as far as I'm aware, any tension between the locals and the community. But it's also, I think this is more of a meta-modern move as well, is like sometimes that the postmodern spirit in us, which is beautiful, that kind of green sensibility of we're all one human family, and if only everyone lived this way, we would all be so much happier and we'd be so much healthier. And I don't know. I'm suspicious of that, and I take a little bit more of the lighthouse um, sensibility of extending out a hand, like beaming out a light and saying, anybody who would like to come, you're welcome to experience it for a retreat or to come for a weekend or to be sponsored by a host family. Or to come for a day visit and a tour, like whatever it is. And if you have desire to, deepen, then we can be in relationship around that. But it's not explicitly, at least as of now, in my sensibility, a missionary work where we're trying to go out and convert other people to live like the lighthouse people do and build churches everywhere that, it's not doing that. It's also not opposed to standing proudly for what we're up to and, offering like making a convincing argument for why this is a beautiful way to live and telling stories that help to communicate that more broadly. So that's one thing. I'm just gonna pause because there's another thread and I wanted to come back. One of the reasons why, so I was a filmmaker. I still do film, but I was a professional documentary and commercial film director and living in LA and had a beautiful career. And I remember at one point, this is around 2017, I was sitting in my big, beautiful apartment and watching a documentary on my big, beautiful TV. And the documentary, I forgot what it was, but it exposed some terrible thing happening in the world and then showed what's possible if we all just do this. And then, the credits came on, and I remember sitting on my couch being like, okay, great. I just found out about another problem in the world, and I just found out about, something we need to do that's mostly completely out of my hands in order to address that problem. Now I turn off the TV and I'm just back sitting on my couch, and like nothing really changes. And I remember thinking to myself, like, is this really the best way to change culture, to have an impact on the broader world? Is just making people kind of feel shitty about more problems that are mostly out of their control and having them sit and stare at a screen all day, which they already are doing way more than what is healthy. And that's when I read Tribe by Sebastian Junger and Lost Connections by Johan Hari. And those two books I read in the same month, and they both completely changed my life. And they opened me to community. And I started to research intentional communities, and I started to visit. And I remember the first one that I went to was called Dancing Rabbit Eco Village in Missouri, middle of Mennonite country, middle of nowhere. Beautiful community. It's a kind of a hippie eco village of sorts, and they've been around for also over 20 years, so it's thriving. And I remember I did a 2-week apprenticeship there and learned all about the systems and the structures and what they're up to. And I was like, wow, this is storytelling. This community is telling a story that is an experiential, immersive story. It's like going to Burning Man or something where people go and they're like, whoa, I'm living in a different structure of consciousness. This is not like ordinary reality that I know. And I had that experience by going to many of these communities, and they each tell a slightly different story, but there's also a universal story that's being told underneath. And the story is sometimes heartbreaking and also sometimes a love story and also sometimes a mystery. And they also sometimes have unsatisfying endings. And some of them are really amazing dramas that really aliven the soul. And that's when that started to plant in me of like maybe my story, like I'm a storyteller archetypally, but maybe film is the wrong medium. Maybe the medium that I want to move into now is more around immersive storytelling that is creating collective containers where we can live together into a different story over days and weeks that has a way of not just like passively staring at a screen for 90 minutes and then shutting off the TV and going about our lives, but is actually creating enough time and there's enough of an experiential, immersive quality that something shifts in our structure and our psyche and our soul, and it's hard to go back from that. So when I went to Pachamama, I would sit with people and hold their hand while they called their corporate boss and quit their jobs. Or I would sit with people while they reconnected with their mom after, years of not talking. And during a meditation retreat, they had some opening in which they were told that they should reconnect with this person. And all these people were deeply changing aspects of their lives, and those changes were rippling out even while they were still there, and let alone when they left and then would tell people about it and the word would spread. And then, like they would see their reality back in, Vancouver or Mexico City or wherever it is that they live. And they would go back and be like, whoa, I'm seeing reality differently now. And that creates this whole psychoactive process that unfolds over a lifetime. And so Yes, I imagine that the Regenerative Lighthouse Village will have community service projects and will be doing stuff with the local community and will be, maybe bringing people in on scholarship and sponsorship and like all sorts of ways in which it can help support the broader world. And I think a lot of this stuff happens in a bit more of a mysterious way, in a bit more of a storytelling way, where it's like, yeah, if you go to a Broadway play and see Hamilton, maybe that doesn't like change the world necessarily. It's just a play. But I don't know, that changed my life and it changed how I related to the United States of America and it changed how I related to art and to theater. And I think about Hamilton all the time and I imagine what it's like to be these young revolutionaries that are starting and creating a new culture and that like the story lives in me as a part of my soul topography. And I think that that matters even if it's less tangible.
Yeah, I agree completely though. And it, I don't know if, do you know who Miles Horton is? I've heard him from Highlander Folk School in Tennessee.
No.
No, he is. Yeah. So he lived during the 60s during the civil rights, and he went to Union Theological Center in Columbia to study, and then he dropped out because he felt like that was not his thing. And then he went to, I think it was Denmark, and was the first time he got in contact with like folk schools. And then he was like, oh, we need to have something like that in Tennessee, in the Appalachian region for like civics education. Um, and it's so interesting because very few people know about Highlander Folk School.
Mm,
Like folks in the US, like they don't know about Miles Horton.
mm,
And Highlander Folk School was like an educational center, research center where it was so influential during the civil rights movement. Like
mm,
Martin Luther King trained there. Rosa Parks says that before she did the bus boycott in Montgomery, like she did that because she was at the Highlander Folk School, and it was the first time that she actually saw that black and white folks could actually live together in peace, and that gave her like the self-authorship to really stand up for what she believed in. Um, and like I've studied him a lot, and he's such an inspiration for me because he never wanted Highlander to gain scale, like never. Like the only thing that he wanted to do is just to keep doing the work day and night with the most integrity possible. And in a lot of ways, a lot of folks don't know about Highlander and even like the impact that he had. But like a lot of folks say that it was crucial for like civil rights movement, that maybe wouldn't have happened in the way that it did because of what Highlander was doing. So there was just something about that story that was coming up for me as you were sharing, that it is very mysterious um and a lot of times like yeah, I feel like even the folks that are not there on the spotlight are some that are doing the most like in integrity, profound work and transformative work that it's hard to point to like what exactly is changing, but
yeah.
uh, God knows.
There's one other thing that is really important in this conversation that hasn't been mentioned yet, and it's directly about this question, which is kids.
Yeah.
Even more than creating a regenerative lighthouse village vision, I really desire to be a dad. And I already feel like I'm a father in some strange way to many things in life, but I really desire to have biological children and to have a family. And to me, those two things are not separate. The motivation to have a village metamodern culture that is, of course, a work in progress prototype, but is also a different form of reality than our current reality that my children can grow up in, is a way of protecting my children, is a way of offering them as much love and care as I can, knowing that I'll fail spectacularly so many times because that's also part of the human experience and father parenting. Um, and yeah, and so I also imagine that there'll be many families and many kids eventually on in the community, and that's raising children and the education system, whoever it is that is stewarding that aspect of it, the school, and not just the school like the classroom where the kids go, but the school of life that is the culture of the whole village and the way that the stories that we tell to our children that have them see reality and structure their minds and their hearts in certain ways. That is the best story that I know in terms of impact change on a large scale over time, you know, is to raise a new generation in the soil of healthy human wholeness as imperfectly as we can in the context that we have available to us.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. I think as an educator, that moves me deeply. And I think, have you, I don't necessarily hear that enough that, like communities, even like eco villages actually have like schools. I know like folks like raise kids together, but like, I think I don't know if you intentionally said school, but like, is that something that is
Yeah,
like part of the to really be creating? It will be like a metamodern school
definitely.
for in
And my
there.
friend Hale O'Haron, right down the street in Boulder, is prototyping what that looks like. I say prototyping sometimes, and what I mean by that is that there's a way in which it's we're consciously looking at it as a constant experimentation that is ever evolving. But it's also not just a prototype, it's an actual school that kids go to and they're doing really well. And I think they're filled out for a couple of years. And it's a wilderness-based school where they go in nature and their classroom is in nature and they're teaching the kids all these really interesting ways of attuning to them energetically, not just through their minds. And it's really fantastic work that they're doing. So you would love Hale, by the way. I would love to connect you to. Um, so yeah, and at Pachamama, just to use that as an example, one of the most palpable things, and I remember this at Dancing Rabbit as well, but really every community I went to where the kids are have grown up in that place there's just a different look in their eyes. There's the quality of energy. I remember one time I was seeing a group of kids, they were like playing with a goat or something, and they were maybe 100 feet away from me. And before I could even see them, I could feel the energy field moving towards me. And I was like, whoa, these kids feel healthier. Like they feel, even from a distance, I can just like sense the vitality in their being that is so different from your average kid, I guess, that grows up in suburbia or is on screens all day or, you know, and yes. So yes, there will be a school. I don't know what type of school. That's not my piece of the puzzle, but if someone is listening and this is your piece of the puzzle, you should reach out.
Yeah.
And it's your piece. I mean, I would love to, if you're open to it, Marcel, I'd love to trade interviews and interview you one day where about what you're up to in Brazil around all of this, because I know that you're holding the torch for this. I think you're working with a little bit of older kids, right? Like teenagers.
Like 15. Well, as I get older, it keeps getting older too, the youth I work with, but was mostly like 15 to like 20, 25. And now I'm like working until like 29.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like the younger generation. Yeah.
So another thing that the Guild is doing that we haven't shared too much about yet, but I plan to publish an article about this, is creating a developmental map that is essentially, we call it initiatory thresholds of source keeping. And the idea is that in a context of village for young kids around that age, teenagers, people in their early 20s, bringing back the quality of, say, apprenticeship. It's some of these more traditional contexts that have been often lost in the modern world. I mean, I had really great internships in college, and in a way, my internships were better than my college education itself in terms of learning more. And so I feel like I was blessed to have the modern version of that. But bringing back the idea of moving into an apprenticeship phase and then having older people in the village that are able to be apprenticed to and then also to serve and guide. And I see that at some of these communities where, during a ceremony, for example, at Pachamama, the 18-year-old who was born on the village is now an apprentice to the people that are tending the fire at the middle, the two older men. And then there's elders that are holding the space in the background that are like the grandpas. And these are very basic things that most people have and many contexts across the planet. Um, and it's just bringing that back, but bringing it back in a way that feels fresh and not trying to conform back into traditional ways of being that our systems have will probably not want to contort back into, but doing it in a new way that is honoring of the past, but also bringing a fresh take to it.
Yeah, no, I think it's wonderful. Yeah, I think like having Zach as a big inspiration and mentor, just like the almost like
Zach Stein?
yeah, Zach Stein, just like rebuilding intergenerational transmission this level, I think is one of the most important things is, and it is what he says as like this is what education is.
Yeah.
Like that relationship is what education really is, like more than before schools were invented. Um so I completely believe in that. And to me, like my own question is like, how do we create the conditions for that to happen? Like more and more like that kind of like, because there's something about the apprenticeship that there is like a love relationship, there's like trust and like a loving relationship, and that makes all the difference. It's
Yeah.
not just training for a job, it's like really training for life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's hard to love so fully in our modern context because we have so many relationships. For me, I'm in touch with hundreds of people a week, whether it's someone in the grocery store for 5 minutes or 30 seconds, or whether it's 2 hours with Marcelo. I mean, and so to have and by love, I just mean energy output, life force to give. But in the context of a village, even though in a way it feels like, oh, there's a lot of people here, but there's also a lot of people holding a lot of people. And so it's not as individually straining or draining. Sometimes it is. Again, I don't want to make generalizations here. Um, but the idea is that, oh, wow, you're 17 years old now and you're entering into an apprenticeship phase, and we're going to collectively hold a ritual to honor that. And I've seen you grow up for, 8 years since the day that I first got to the village. And I know your parents, and I had dinner with them last night. And, like your sister is best friends with my daughter, like that, And so there's just a natural desire to want to give and to serve and to show up and to be in relationship with that entanglement of love that's already present without needing to create it
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
force
No,
it. Yeah.
beautifully said. Yeah.
Should we wind down?
I think so, huh?
I
Yeah.
could talk for hours.
No, same here. It was wonderful.
I really appreciate this, Marcelo. This is only maybe the second time that I've shared as fully about. I mean, I have conversations all the time with people about this, but they're usually shorter, little bits and bops. And yeah, I just want to name that we're building the village right now. And I don't mean that as a cute, poetic thing to say, but literally, whatever village may or may not come in the future is because of the soil that we are tending to and watering and listening to at the same time. And you are a part of this project as much as anybody else in the world right now. And I'm really, really grateful for that.
Yeah. No, and I feel it. Like I feel the village being built, and also I feel like the uniqueness of it in the way that it's being approached. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's like my deep honor also to be here, to be a part of it, to witness, to support, and also to be able to dig a little more into everything that, like your body is holding, but that a lot of people are also contributing to that. So thank you so much,
Thank
Stuka.
you, brother. Yeah, appreciate you. Love you lots.
Yeah,
See you on
same.
Friday.
Yeah, that's it.
Bye.